It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. I'm excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Eric Quanstrom. Eric is Chief Marketing Officer of Kyte Desk. Kyte Desk makes automated prospecting software for business-to-business sales. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Eric, welcome to Accelerate.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Looking forward to a great discussion.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Follow up on, I was a guest on Eric's show last week at a conference in Chicago. So we'll get a chance to hear that at some point. So take a second, introduce yourself. So how'd you end up where you are?
Sure. So I've led marketing teams in the high-tech or SaaS space for, the last decade and a half now. And Kyte Desk is kind of a fun project and company because we get to help salespeople be better at their jobs. And, everyone always struggles with lead generation, especially high-growth sales teams where, there can never be enough leads, right? And never be enough effective lead outreach, and that's really what
enough good leads
provide, right?
Yeah, enough good leads, right?
That's right. And as a lifelong marketer, I think that lead quality is always at the forefront of every marketer's mind.
And you've probably never heard a salesperson complain about the quality of leads.
I've got a Teflon jacket that I put on whenever that conversation. Yeah, exactly. Kevlar is probably a better analogy.
Yeah. So, well, that is sort of one of the real core issues. It's always been a core issue. Salespeople love to have leads given to them. But especially with the SaaS business and the growth of inside sales and the specialized sales roles that are evolving with sales development, business development reps, and so on, is having a good source of leads is pretty important.
It's critical. And I think that, there's a lot of people out there that tend to like to fall in one camp or another where, I'm going to predominantly focus on inbound, and that's what I really believe in. And, inbound is everything. And I know a lot of marketers, my birds of a feather, if you will, that feel very strongly about kind of the inbound movement that's been happening for the last decade plus.
Well, how
and
so?
Then there's other.
Feel strongly. What do they feel? You said they feel strongly. What do they feel?
Yeah, I think a lot of them feel that inbound is a much cleaner, more intent-driven, more customer-centric way of bringing, customers into your fold, waiting for people to raise their hands and then servicing them in many respects. I think that, where I was going with that, though, is there's also the same amount of fervor around kind of outbound marketing and defining ideal customers, going after them with techniques and tactics and, an outreach strategy that is very intentional about who you want in your customer base, which logos you want to hang on your website and call your customers. Mm-hmm. And I kind of split the middle, right? I think that there's a time and a place for both. And I think that it's the smart business that takes advantage of key inbound and key outbound strategies and actually works them together in ways that are fairly scalable.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is, and I'm a sales guy, not a marketing guy, is that, and I write about this in my latest book, is that, yeah, if we lived in an ideal world, all sales leads would be generated, high-quality leads would be generated through inbound marketing. But until such time exists, which it doesn't, we got to blend it with outbound.
Yeah, I would even take it a step further and say that, especially as companies are moving through various growth stages in their life cycle, I think outbound punches through the natural ceilings that are inherent to inbound. And that's the way I like to frame it up.
So you're saying until a company has developed a brand and a reputation and so on, where the inbound can be more effective, that, hey, if you're starting to scale, do what you got to do and do the outbound.
Yeah, and also I think that there's natural inhibitors, if you will. Google only re-indexes their search for top 10 results, every so often. It's not like an everyday occurrence, and frankly, there's not that much variance. So if you look at the key cornerstone component of inbound marketing, which is search engine optimization and content marketing laid bare, it's a much more medium to long-term strategy than it is a short-term spike of taking effective market share in a competitive space.
Right. But it's sort of all right. So let's look at your a different question I was going to ask, but I'll revert to this one. So let's look at what you're doing at Kyte Desk. Is how do you blend those two? Because you just raised a bunch of money from venture investors. Obviously, you have an imperative to scale pretty quickly. So what does your mix look like?
Sure. So, ironically enough, the situation that I inherited coming into Kyte Desk was kind of having a mandate of moving beyond just our own tool, right? So, there really wasn't kind of an inbound channel or dedicated marketing staff in a department prior to my arrival. Mm-hmm. And, the good news is that I've been able to kind of swim upstream and create and validate and build our brand accordingly. With the backdrop of having, kind of a very sales-centric organization that believes wholeheartedly in outbound and has been prospecting, and that's frankly what our tool does for a while now. So, we continue to optimize our tool, and one of the great things about doing so is that, we use ourselves as our own kind of test bed. Mm-hmm. We drink our own champagne is the moniker of choice.
Well, you're saying you're optimizing. So what's changing that is sort of driving that optimization? What do you see happening on a real-time basis in sales that's saying, oh gosh, where we were 6 months ago, there's now a demand for something else. And what are those things?
Well, I think that it's really a matter of honing in on the key value propositions that, our customers are looking for. So I'll give you one perfect example along those lines. Our tool, we've folded into the Kyte Desk Find product, which is our flagship product, the ability to go out and find your ideal customer profiles or accounts. And so we've given a lot of visualization tools that help you get the right kind of lead lists built so that you can be really effective and efficient with your time spent prospecting.
All right, so give an example of that, just so people understand.
Yeah, so let's pretend that, I'm a business that's selling IT services, and I really want to target the CTO of a given organization. And I know my geographies, I know my size of business, I have a good conception of, how high up the stack I want to start at the mm-hmm. CTO level, or maybe I want to even go down the stack and find, again, my ideal customers. Kyte Desk can do that, really efficiently. You basically start with the product, and you give it that criteria in a visual fashion, and we hand back to you essentially the data that you need to go and start prospecting. Direct dials, emails, social profile, and even referral information for who at your company would be the path to a warm introduction.
Yeah, and you're doing that you work with a number of, I'll call them aggregators, list aggregators or whatever, that you pull that data into Kyte Desk from.
That's right. And so, we're trying to be essentially the prospector's best friend. Prospecting's hard. Let's take a one step back and just get real. It's the kind of stuff that makes sales a grind in many respects, where you're spending a lot of time researching, reaching out through various channels can be very cumbersome. And we take a lot of that heavy lifting off of the plate of, the average salesperson so that they can be more effective and, spend more time selling, which is kind of what they're there to do.
Yeah. So how does an organization use Kyte Desk? Let's say if they have a sales ops person or somebody dedicated to, list management, data hygiene, and so on.
Sure. So you would basically, put Kyte Desk into the seats of those that, would be spending a percentage of their time in lead development, in prospecting, and then they just go to town. They can work with the sales ops manager or director to create ideal lead lists, or they can do it themselves. And the beauty of where Kyte Desk kind of lives in the software stack is really at the top of the funnel, where you're still trying to determine whether or not there's interest and viability for the prospects that you're reaching out to. And again, we give you all of those downstream tools like emails and templates and read receipts and a dialer. And then, we've got some surprises up our sleeves coming out soon that'll orchestrate a lot of that work and workflow. So depending on when this podcast airs, we'll
make sure it's after this release.
Yeah, it will potentially have even more of a story to tell around the prospecting process that can make a company, really effective and efficient. And we all know in sales, the more effective and efficient you are at the top of the funnel, the more full your pipeline becomes, the better your chance of hitting quota, and the more productive your account executives are at closing business because, frankly, they've got, better defined leads, filling their pipelines with qualified meetings.
Well, so
pretty simple.
Right. So you touch on an interesting topic, which I want to bring up quite a bit when I talk to people in the space like you are, is right, there's this push-pull tension between quantity and quality.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it seems to be, good intentions notwithstanding and stated intentions notwithstanding for many players in the field, is managers find it easy now, having all these tools, to start gravitate toward the quantity side, right? Especially companies that are trying to scale quickly. It's always about more and more and more. We really will focus on quality later. So how do you help companies, which to me is crazy, is I'd rather get the process right the first time, is how do you help them in this quality versus quantity balance?
Well, be careful what's about to fall out of my mouth because, Seth Godin once said marketers ruin everything. And I would argue that a lot of my marketing brethren, and this is a pretty easy trap to fall into, but, I like to call it CPM thinking. And what it means is essentially cost per mil, right? Mm-hmm. Most marketers grow up thinking in terms of cost per thousand with everything that they do, because that's how they buy ads, that's how they send mails, that's kind of what is drilled into them from a very early age, right? It's all about talking to a mass audience. And frankly, I'm actually pleased with the direction that a lot of kind of the sales development space is going, which is more towards personalization, more towards I'm going to do my homework, more towards I'm going to attempt to have a one-on-one communication with a targeted account, and I'm going to use the tools that are there to do just that, rather than just batch and blast, and live with a 1% conversion rate.
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly though, the personalization is fairly low touch personalization, right? I mean, in terms of what a lot of the tools afford is you go to conferences and people talk about we're personalizing, but that amounts to basically putting somebody's first name on a template and sending it out.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I would challenge that a little bit and say that listen, as a marketer, you're also on the buy side more often than not, and the daily approach emails and phone calls and social touches that I get, unfortunately tend to be fairly uninspired. Right. And it's the ones that have actually done their homework, that have actually taken the time to do even the most rudimentary kind of 3x3 types of personalization, mm-hmm. where I respond. I'm a focus group of one here, but the point is that I actually think that that's probably the most reliable indicator of getting through the cold email, the cold call veil, if you will, or wall, depending on one's perspective, is to actually have invested the time to do so.
Oh, I agree 100%. I was making that same point. It's just, it seems like the pressure on the quantity makes it so hard for meaningful personalization to take place. It seems to me like that's where the model potentially is going to break, or is breaking already, right? Is that the tools tend to, like I said, be used more for, hey, I got to get my 50 contacts out today, as opposed to, really making, as you said, give me 22 that contacts, half that number that really stand out and that are going to break through the noise, and then apply it to the same conversion rate you have, and you're going to have a better result.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very encouraged that the tools allow for greater capacity, but again, in the hands of bad actors, the greatest tool can still be misused. and there's nothing in the software industry that'll ever change that, as far as I can tell.
Sure. Well, I think part of it is what do you think will change that? I mean, that's a question I'm curious about. And I've asked a lot of people that same question. Is from a buyer's perspective, what you hear as the message is, hey, I'm being inundated by undifferentiated messaging from salespeople. And yeah, it's becoming overwhelming. It's too much. And especially in, let's say, a segment of, companies said, okay, yeah, we're going to give you a territory with these logos that you need to go get, and you need to have this quantity of contacts, and they're just going to slash and burn through those really quickly, and then what?
Well, I think ultimately it comes back down to conversion rates, because I would be willing to bet that the same companies that you're talking to, and I've listened to your podcast and even the sales stack interviews, the converse is that most savvy businesses are loading up on tools because they realize there is a better way to, essentially get anything done, right? Like, it would seem foolish to us to run a modern sales organization without a CRM or
absolutely, without a sales development platform.
Exactly.
Without Kyte Desk.
Without Kyte Desk, you're nowhere. Anyhow, the point is that I think that it is too much, but at the same time, it's not enough, right? And so ultimately, where we find our center is in the conversion rates of what's working. And that tends to be where people align their resources behind. Because once they find, and I think this is true of both marketing and sales, once an organization finds a repeatable process that leads to favorable outcomes, most importantly for the customers they serve, they repeat it and they look to replicate and they look to reinforce that which is working. That's part of the successful organizations that I've been a part of in the past. And I would argue that you probably had a similar experience.
Sure. Well, we don't even have to argue about that. But yeah, no, absolutely. But I guess one of the questions I have is that it seems to be, though, and let's take the SaaS industry as an example, having been in multiple conferences now in the last few months about this, is that there's a general acceptance of a close rate, that conversion rate, we'll call it, that seems awfully low. So if it's kept low, then the only answer is you got to do a lot more on the top of the funnel to get the requisite numbers through the conversion. And God, my instinct is when sales jobs that I've had, either managing teams or as an individual, is I want to get my conversion rate up. But there seems to be this acceptance of let's have a lower conversion, not a lower, but lower than what I think should be acceptable, and we're just going to get more opportunities to run by that conversion rate.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because I think that just throwing numbers at the problem is, at some point, like you spring holes in the bucket. What I mean?
That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I would share that same concern because I think that working on your business, to truly be a successful professional or a successful entrepreneur, someone who's moving the needle and really making a difference, you're always working on conversion rate optimization, always, because there's nothing that, these are the force factors. They're the practices. They're the processes that are inherent to every business that are wholly and 100% controllable by you, right? You can't control what competitors are doing. You can't control what the economic climate is. You can't control for a lot of things, but one of the things that you definitely can control for in your own organization are your own conversion rates.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, no, I absolutely. For people listening, I take this lesson to heart from what Eric's saying is you can control your conversion rate. So rather than just say, let me feed more bodies into the mix and let's stay at the same conversion rate and that's how we'll increase sales, is maybe get more qualified prospects, more or greater quantity of more qualified prospects into your pipeline, increase your conversion rate, and you're going to have the same effect. And it should be easier to scale at that point.
Well, and I've always been fascinated by the laws of numbers as they kind of pass through I don't love this phrase or this model, but it helps people think about their sales operations. So the funnel, if you will, when you increase that first conversion rate, like whether you're moving from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead into an opportunity, from an opportunity into like either proposal or quoting, and then, into a closed won state, which I think give or take some semantics or some, different terms, or maybe even a tier here and there, is what most businesses are kind of looking at from a sales cycle, especially in B2B. The most effective conversion rates to optimize for are at the very top of the funnel, because what that does is it gives you a better chance for every other conversion rate that you can control thereafter.
Absolutely. Great point for people. And it starts with having quality conversations up front to be able to do that. You bet.
And the more targeted, the better. And that's kind of, again, folding back to where we were earlier about getting, real around who you want to target. And I didn't quite answer your earlier question, so I'll take this opportunity to kind of go back there. You'd asked, well, what are we doing at Kyte Desk on the marketing side that it also assists our sales? And so we've spent, some time digging in the dirt of account-based marketing around, developing ad strategies, developing kind of awareness campaigns, developing right time, right message type of stuff that consistently flows throughout our sales cycle and thus makes all those other conversion rates, all those other interactions potentially more meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love it. All right, we're going to take a short break and come back with my guest, Eric Quanstrom, talk some more about sales development, sales, marketing, and so on. Be right back. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. Welcome back with my guest today, Eric Quanstrom, Chief Marketing Officer of Kyte Desk. And I wanted to talk about something a little bit different. You had written an article recently, which I liked, and thought we'd go through it. Talked about the 3 sales development basics hiding in plain sight. And I thought 3 good points for salespeople to keep in mind and managers as they manage and coach their performers. And so the first one was sales development is, you call it adept product knowledge. And I thought that the twist that was really interesting you talk about is that it's not enough just to master your own product, but you need to know the competitor as well, the competition as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote the article, the other kind of example that I held out there was, and for those that have never heard this story, I found it personally interesting that the basketball great coach at UCLA, John Wooden, deceased now, but one of the things that he used to do consistently with every team that he ever coached was the first lesson that he ever taught was essentially how to put on your shoes and how to tie your shoelaces. And you're saying to yourself, how crazy is that, right? Like, are you kidding me? Like, this guy's sitting there and pontificating or giving a lesson on, lacing one's shoes and how you won't get blisters if you put on your shoes and do your socks right. But the meta point that I think was really the takeaway for me in that anecdote, and after hearing stories related from everyone from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton down the line, the point was that no detail is too unimportant to master, right? And so when you think about product knowledge, really what is quite critical, I think, for most salespeople that are representing a product is to know where you fit, is to understand where in the landscape, so to speak, you fit, how to synthesize your customer's understanding of where you might fit with their organization, and then be able to reiterate or essentially guide them towards an understanding or a learning. This is the most effective persuasive technique is to let people have their own aha moments to guide them towards what your product can do for them because you understand so well how to get them there.
Right. And as I mentioned, I mean, as you talk about in the article, it's not just enough to know what you do, but you need the context of where you fit.
That's right.
Yeah, very important because, again, if you're, as you said, trying to inspire someone, as I like to talk about, is inspire a buyer to take a journey with you, is, part of their willingness to do so is based upon understanding, what that journey entails and how it compares to making another journey that they might make with somebody else.
Well, and if I were to even kind of invoke that sports metaphor one more time.
Let's do more sports cliches. We can never have enough.
You can never have enough. But if you watch great sports players playing a game, one of the things that you'll inevitably hear an announcer say is that the game's really slowed down for them. And it's like, well, what the hell is he talking about? That's totally counterintuitive. But what ends up happening is, and you're an avid sportsman, a cross country, a fitness buff, triathlete, if you will. But there comes a point where because you've mastered certain techniques, because you've mastered endurance and what goes into preparing for a race, you'll actually hit times where, things definitely tend to slow down, right? Like you understand what's coming next. Mm-hmm. Do you not?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I think it's a great analogy for selling is you're, instead of being, once you've mastered this knowledge, you can then be what I call in the moment with the prospect, right? Instead of being so concerned about having, am I going to make sure I remember say this or say that or so on, is it's just there for you. And so, the game does slow down. The interactions with the prospects slow down. And you have the ability to recall this information in a contextual way.
Well, and more importantly, you have this ability to not only be in the moment, but listen.
Well,
right? Like
to me, that's part of being in the moment is you're there to listen to them, right?
Right. And if you don't listen, if you're always thinking about what you're going to say next in the context of a demo or a discovery call or, subsequent sales meetings, there's a really high correlation with what you miss.
Exactly.
And it's funny because if you listen to, if you do role play and you listen to tapes and, you kind of go back and forth with practice, it becomes immediately obvious, right? Again, back to the sports metaphor. If you watch tape, you'll see what techniques you need to work on, and they'll become immediately obvious. It's just in the day-to-day, when we're not doing that, it's really easy to overlook and glide past all those things that, frankly, you should be working on, the little details.
Right. Okay, well, the second point you had then was learn the problem behind the problem. And in this case, you really were evoking your own initials when you talk about EQ, emotional intelligence, is, sales development really depends on making that connection with the prospect.
Yeah, and again, I just want to make sure that this comes off the right way. I hear, or I've heard a lot of people talk about sales and relationship building. I bought tons of products, or I've spearheaded as the lead decision maker for marketing organizations, a ton of buys, if you will. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking for my next friend. You know what I mean? Like, I don't necessarily need a sales relationship in my life, nor am I seeking one.
Well, it's the definition of what a relationship is, right? I mean, I believe that prospect, as I have a slide I use in presentation, says, customers don't buy you, they buy what you can do for them.
That's right. And so the point that I'm driving towards here is understanding that, paying attention to those same details, looking for the problem behind the problem is almost a forcing function to getting you into the right habits of asking intelligent questions that will further a relationship with a prospective buyer. Right? And I think that that's really important because oftentimes salespeople are judged by the quality of questions that they ask.
As they should be. Because the customer is saying, look, I've got a limited amount of time and I'm investing some of that time in you. And if you're just asking these inane questions, then I'm not getting a very good return on my investment in time in you.
Well, and it's kind of ironic too, because the best sales scenarios that I can ever recall being a part of or being on the other end of are when salespeople come really prepared. Again, the game kind of slows down for them. They ask really intelligent questions, and they control the conversation not by telling, but rather by asking.
Yeah. Well, and that's absolutely right. I mean, so I wrote an article not that long ago. People can find it online. We called the Ask, Don't Tell formula. And when you're given a choice between making a fact-based statement about your product or asking another insightful question, ask the question. The customer can find the facts out easily enough.
Right. And how about asking questions that lead them down the path of discovery? Because a customer will reward you cognitively to a much higher degree with something that they find to be true and accept to be true for themselves if you led them there, as opposed to you telling them. Because asserting anything as a salesperson automatically comes with a cloud of doubt around it, right? I've got to have my filter up and my bias on because you're about to tell me something that you obviously have a stake in me believing to be true.
Right.
You know, so why ruin some of your best don't rob your customers of their best aha moments. You know, like that's what I said earlier. Let them come to them on their own. Just make sure you lead them there as often as possible.
Exactly. All right. And the last point you had was communication frequency is you don't want to communicate too much with them, especially if they're not ready. But at the same time, you'll make sure you don't communicate too infrequently.
Yeah, and I think that this one is a really hard and tricky balance. But again, it's kind of like hidden in plain sight because the instincts are so often misaligned with what you actually should be doing, right? The check-in email, oh God, right? Like, can we just banish this?
Well, yeah, I have the cure for that, by the way.
Yeah, I have a few of my own. But anyways, the point is like there's a bunch of things that we do almost reflexively without thinking that are just so not necessary. And again, putting yourself in the customer's shoes, getting into like a flow of understanding what would be valuable for them means that balance will actually come quite naturally in the sales cycle.
Yeah, the cure I had, which is actually a very serious one, is, and again, write about this in my books, is that every interaction you have with a prospect has to deliver something of value to them. That's your bar you have to pass. So your check-in call, all these extraneous check-ins, phone calls, emails you'll send somebody. Yeah, unless you're adding something of value there for the prospect, it could be a link to an article or a white paper. It could be some other important point you have to discuss or question to ask. But unless you understand in advance, then you're consciously doing that, right? You're consciously communicating. Then just don't do it.
It's great law. It's great.
Yeah.
Great habit to be in.
So, okay. Well, good. Well, great information. And we'll give people a chance a second to learn more about where they can find out more about Kyte Desk and about you. But moving to the last segment of my show is I've got some questions I ask all my guests. You say you've been listening to episodes, so you should be well prepared with answers for this. So the first one is hypothetical scenario where you've just been hired as a new sales leader at a company whose sales have stalled out. They want to get unstuck. They want you to get them unstuck. So what 2 things would you do your first week on the job that could have the biggest impact?
So for me, it's understanding, again, that internal lay of the land. And this is where I go in and I audit. And I audit like crazy, right? Like I look at the current processes that are in place, the current tool sets that are in place, the current team that's there, and I begin to essentially interview and begin to build up like, here's what we're doing now. Because if you don't know what you're doing now, then you don't know what you need to change, right? Mm-hmm. And it's that process, it's actually probably more than 2 things, unfortunately. So I fudge a little bit with my answer. That gives me the ability to not only get to know people at a work level and what their work product is, but also their styles, what they're coming to the table with, how they've been taught in the past, and where is the ability to bring and to synthesize disparate pieces of information into kind of a new view that I then begin to ask other people to see if they share, begin to test the hypothesis. But coming up with that hypothesis in the beginning, I think is one of the strengths that I possess. And I do it because I've had various roles. And frankly, I think it's effective beyond the sales situation in situations that I have with, our staff here at Kyte Desk, in other roles that I've had in the past, in managing people, so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great suggestion, being able to, like I said, synthesize disparate data into perhaps a new insight, a new perspective that people don't currently hold. Love it. So what's one book every salesperson should read?
Well, I'll tell you what I've just finished in reverse chronological order. So I really enjoyed the Sales Development Playbook by Trish Bertuzzi.
Yes.
Very cogent marination on tactics and strategies in this industry that frankly, Kyte Desk is in, and that you talk a lot about as well.
Yep, great book.
Prior to that, Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt, another one that I highly recommend, especially for those that are doing, kind of research and prospecting, lead development on a day in and day out basis. Go grab that book. You will not be sorry.
Yeah, a lot of good information about how to structure your day.
Yeah. So I had I have a lot of kudos for both of those books.
Okay, great answers. Let's see. Tough question here is what music's on your playlist right now?
I've been listening to a lot more LCD Sound System since they decided to get back together, and I'm looking forward to where and when they are going to tour. It was tremendously disappointing to see them break up a couple of years ago, but even more exciting to believe that there's a new album coming out somewhere in the future here.
Okay, good answer. Yeah, I think that's the first time they've come up on our list. But that's good. Yeah, I like it. Well, we got a lot of classic rock people, even cross-generational, generations, even younger generation versus old. A lot of classic rock there.
Well, I grew up on classic rock, so that would be the pat answer. You can't grow up in the San Francisco Bay Area without being kind of like schooled on like
being
the
a
basics.
Deadhead, right?
Well, I don't even necessarily think of the Dead as classic rock.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Give me a little Led Zeppelin, and I think you're in the ballpark.
All right, good. Well, Eric, thanks for joining me, and I want you to tell people how they can find out more about Kyte Desk.
Sure. So you can go directly to our website at www.kytedesk.com, exactly how you'd think about spelling it. Follow us at Kyte Desk on Twitter. And be sure to, much like the listeners of this podcast are looking to accelerate, we've got an entire blog that's updated daily, usually with contributors not working for Kyte Desk, but leading voices in the sales space, essentially giving best practices, thought pieces, different perspectives and ways to think about accelerating your business going forward. So we're looking to educate on our blog. So I highly encourage people to check that out.
All right, as do I. It's a good resource. So again, thanks for being on the show. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. That word, accelerate again. And an easy way to do that is to make this podcast a part of your daily routine, whether you listen on your commute, in the gym, or as part of your morning sales meeting. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Eric Quanstrom, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me. And until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.